For me, it's like, I have to start from the bottom. What can I do? Fuck it, I'm going to take a comedy class. And this is after I won an American Comedy Award and won Star Search.
Good for you.
And that's what I did, because I had to make friends with people that were just starting out in comedy. Again, I had to swallow my pride and do it.
This episode of London Real is sponsored by X-Brain. If you live in Europe or the UK, get all of your favorite Onnit products like Alpha Brain, Shroom Tech Sport, even the Bulletproof Coffee from X-Brain. You get it in a matter of days, no foreign exchange, no customs, no problem. Go to xbrain.co.uk and check it out. This week on London Real, we have the lovely Felicia Michaels. Felicia is a stand-up comedian. She's been there since the beginning. She was at the Comedy Store back in the day with Sam Kinison and the whole crew. She was 19 when she was doing this. She was doing dirty comedy, and it's always been dirty, even though she is quite a lovely person. She was actually found on Star Search when she was 19 years old, and then the following year decided to pose nude for Playboy. Talk about career decisions, and she'll talk about that on the show. It was really nice having her in town. I first met Felicia when she was doing the Beauty and the Beast podcast with our good buddy Joey Diaz, and I started listening to them years ago, and I actually been emailing her from back in the day, and so it was nice for her to talk about those times. And yes, we talked a little bit about Joey. Joey, you know I got big love for you. We really want you to come out to England and see all of us here and hug it out maybe. Come on, man, it's been months since that nonsense. It wasn't even beef, it was a Twitter misunderstanding. So yes, we talk about Joey, and well, we talk about everything. You know, there's more to talk about than just that. So I think you'll really love Felicia. She's got a real warm personality, and she's really been there and done that when it comes to comedy and comes to the LA scene, and she's got a nice perspective about her art, her comedy, and her photography. She's quite serious about that. So I think you really enjoy it. If you haven't been paying attention, kids, then you won't know that I am bulletproof. And yes, that means every morning I stick butter and oil into a cup and put coffee in there and drink it. I know it's a little weird, and that's okay. I am a little weird if you haven't noticed. I do crazy things. I smoke DMT. I do this show, so I must have a screw loose somewhere. But I am bulletproof, and I'm enjoying it. It's a type of coffee that is low in mycotoxins. The MCT oil makes my brain work a little better in the morning. And honestly, I don't really eat in the AM, so I'm feeling lean and mean, and I'm still able to train, and I'm really liking that stuff. There's other additives as well. I've got some upgraded collagen, and you can find all that stuff on the bulletproofexec.com or Upgraded Self. Go get some, check it out. I really think it'll change your life. All my good buddies and training partners are bulletproofing these days, and they're really loving the way it makes them feel. So check that out, please. And as you know, I'm in Europe, or the UK. We kind of feel European over here. And if you want that bulletproof or any of the Onnit products like Alpha Brain or Shroom Tech Sport or any of that good stuff, you can go to the folks at X-Brain, and they'll get it to you in a matter of days here in the UK or Europe. Check it out. They also have got their own proprietary line of supplements. They've got a great multivitamin that I'm really feeling, taking some of that every day, and they got other stuff coming soon. So check those guys out. I've had a pretty exciting week here getting ready for Mr. Dan Hardy. Dan's a very interesting guy. I've tried to explain people that aren't in the know that he's more than just a UFC fighter, and he is, which is no disrespect to the other fighters, but you know, Dan's very philosophical. He's been to Peru and drank ayahuasca, and he's really a man that's probably thinking a lot about where his life is going to go from now, and so we're really privileged to have him in the studio. I've been going crazy with a new camera and lighting scheme, and I just want to make it special since Dan's coming and kick things up a notch. So if you have any questions for him, I got a video piece out on YouTube, and if you send me a good one and I use it on there, then I'll put you up there. So definitely check that out. Also, keep a lookout. We got a new look coming for London Real. I'm out on the streets of Shoreditch getting my picture taken. Jesus Christ. We got a new website, and we're moving to Squarespace. And if you're not on Squarespace, you should check it out. If you're thinking about getting to a site, it's an all-in-one, kind of a drag-and-drop piece where you can go in there. even register your URL and have a beautiful website up and running in a matter of hours. You can try it for free. It doesn't even require a credit card. And like I said, we're moving to it, and everyone I know has moved to it. My co-host from Silicon Reel, Colin Pyle, moved to it, colinpyle.com. Melissa Sterry, a bunch of our guests have moved as well. So check it out. If you want to go there, go to squarespace.com/London Reel. If you want to save 10%, God forbid, use the customer code London8, and you'll also give them a shout out that you heard about them on London Reel. So there you go. Some other exciting stuff coming up. I spent the weekend at YouTube. I know, who would want to spend the weekend at YouTube, right? Well, I did, and we were in their studios, and they showed us all their camera equipment, and I got a lesson all over again in lighting and how all the f-stops work and all that stuff. And we might be shooting something at their studio soon, so keep in mind, it's really nice to be welcomed by them. They even bought us lunch, God bless them. So that kind of stuff is coming up, and I got a few YouTubers that are going to be on the show. These are exciting young kids in their 20s that are creating content that they couldn't do this 20 years ago. With the studio system and the nonsense industry of television, they couldn't put their own creative ideas, and now they're making these web series. And these kids are smart, they're funny, they're on top of it, and they're going places. And I looked at them over the weekend, and it feels like I'm looking at a young Spielberg or a young George Lucas. You know, they got so much talent and creativity, and through the medium of YouTube, they're going to bring it to you. So I'm so pumped for those guys. I'm pumped for September, and of course, it's Silicon Reel. We shoot episode 8 tomorrow. Man, they're rattling off. It's nice meeting the who's who, and I know business might not be your thing, but you know, I ask them the same kind of advice questions at the end of the show that I ask everyone on London Reel. Advice they give to the 20-year-old self, advice they give to the 20-year-old listening. So it's all really about the people, and that's our tagline for Silicon Reel. So check that out, and that's it. I released some footage of me, the grandpa, training my final session with Pete Irving this week. I hope you like it. Check it out if you want. Just a little bit more of me if you hadn't had enough. So there you go. Now I give you the very lovely, very sweet, and apparently very dirty when it comes to comedy, Felicia Michaels. Here we go. This is London Reel. I am Brian Rose. My co-host today is Mr. Paul G., who is finishing his degree at Imperial College London in computer science.
Almost done. And
you're about to go back to the Big Apple to make the big money, right?
Trying to, yeah.
You're tired of this one-horse town called London, right?
Yeah, I've had enough. It's been a good ride.
It's been good. You might remember Paul from co-hosting the episode with Dave Asprey, the Bulletproof Executive. Paul's a big fan of modafinil and soon to be data, whatever it is,
data science.
Data science. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for being here today. And our guest is Miss Felicia Michaels.
Hello.
Hello. Who is an American stand-up comedian, nominated twice for the funniest female comic by the American Comedy Awards.
Yes.
You've appeared on Showtime, MTV, VH1, Jesus Christ, NBC, ABC's Full House, and you were also, back in the day, the grand champion on Star Search.
I always get nervous when people say Star Search because it automatically dates me. You know what I mean? I was working some club in Canada last week, and the guy kept saying, you know, the MC, and, you know, Felicia Michaels from Star Search. And I was like, oh, my God. No one in this audience knows what the fuck he's talking about, you know, because everyone's like 18 years old.
Yeah, but the older audience respects it. They're like,
but there is no older audiences in a comedy
maybe you're right.
club.
It does date you.
It does date me.
Well, you know, but you got to be who you are.
Yeah, so. That's true too.
And then you followed up Star Search with another extremely interesting career choice by posing nude for Playboy.
Yes, I did.
That's pretty cool.
You know what? It was the whole Star Search thing is the abnormal thing in my career because I was always a very dirty comic from the beginning. I've been doing comedy for a very long time. I took a big break for kids, but when that came along to do Star Search, I just did it on a fluke and then won because the way that Star Search worked at that time is it was a competition and they would do 2 periods of tapings. So one would be 6 months before the other, and then the semi-champions from each one would go against each other. So it was a complete fluke that I even got to the semifinals.
Wow, but you did.
Yeah, but I did, and I won. But everyone that knew me as a comedian had so much confidence in me. They came up to me because all my jokes were filthy, and Star Search was like a squeaky clean show. And they were like, "Look, I want to give you a couple of my jokes," you know, like all my friends. And like a part of me was like, "Well, I should maybe take those jokes, but then I was like, I would never live it down,
So you went
ever.
with some dirty jokes.
So I
Nice.
tried to figure it out, and thank God I only had to do like 5 minutes in total.
So they wanted to give you jokes that were clean, so you wouldn't screw up Star Search.
Oh yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
okay.
Yeah.
And you won for comedy.
I won for comedy.
Were you competing against other comedians, or was this like a tap show and a this person and a that person?
No, it was comedians.
So it was all comedy.
Yeah.
But Star Search wasn't just comedy.
No, they had other things on there too. They had like the model spokesperson category. Yes, and they had like singing, and they had a bunch of stuff. Yeah.
Okay, it does date you. I barely remember Star Search.
Yeah, I know, dude, because it was so early in my career, and then it was completely ridiculous. And the thing about because it was Ed McMahon. Do you remember Ed McMahon?
I remember Ed McMahon. Yeah.
Ed McMahon.
This was his solo venture.
This was his solo venture.
He was the Johnny Carson yes man for so long.
That's right, and so they would house all the performers away from Ed McMahon, kind of in this cafeteria space, except for the model spokespeople. They got to have the only suite dressing room right next to his.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty weird.
Let me finish with your CV.
Okay, sorry.
Felicia, you're also an accomplished photographer. You've had this project called Stand Up, Strip Down. I've looked at some of those photos, which won first place for the People's Choice of some crazy thing in Paris.
Mm-hmm.
The Prix de la Photographie.
That sounds fancy.
For photojournalism. So
Yes.
there you go. And you also might know Felicia, which is where I first met her, from the podcast Beauty and the Beast with our good buddy, Joey Diaz.
Joey Diaz.
So there you go. Welcome to London Real.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming. It was just
Yeah.
really random on Twitter, and someone mentioned you were coming to London, and
Well, yeah, because I had put on my Twitter and Facebook, I want to go to London on vacation with my kids, but I've always wanted to do a set somewhere in London, and someone hit me back like I should get in touch with you. Isn't that wild?
that is wild.
Yeah.
I know, I saw that, and I was like, yes. Because I sent you an email like 18 months ago when we started doing our podcast, because I was listening to your podcast regularly when I first started 2 years ago.
Yeah.
It was like you guys, Rogan, a couple others, Marin, but Beauty and the Beast was a regular of mine.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. That's
So
nice to hear.
and then I think you responded to one of my emails, and then you never responded to me again. Bitch.
Oh, wow.
No.
What can I tell you?
I know. You had bigger things to do. So, how are you finding London? I mean, I know you came via Europe and stuff like that. But
Well, no, it's nice. I like London. It's expensive.
is it?
It's terribly expensive.
$1 is a pound. It's the same. It's 1 to 1.
I thought it was 1.5.
But it is, but it isn't. So if something costs $3 in the States, it'll be £3 here. That's what I'm saying.
Well, but when I looked it up, it said, how is it is and isn't? How
So
does that work?
Basically, there's an exchange rate of 1.5, but everything really is just the same price. So a Macintosh might cost $2,000 in the States. Here, it'll cost 2,000 pounds. So my way of saying everything's about 50% more expensive here.
Wow.
Felicia's like, what are you talking about?
I have no clue what you're talking
Okay,
about.
so it's expensive.
Yeah, I feel it's expensive, but it's lovely. It's nice.
What do you like about it?
What do I like about it? Well, people speak English. That's a bonus because I just came from Rome and Brussels. I like it. You know what? I like that people are very excited about comedy here still. You know, in the States, like if you tell someone you're a comedian, it's like, whatever.
Because there are a lot of them? Or
Because there are a lot of them, and it's kind of passé now. But here, people are still excited. Oh, you want to come do a show? Oh, yeah, comedy. You know what I mean? I feel like it's still fun
When you say
here.
States, though, you mean LA, right? Or LA and New York, or something.
Yes, I mean, everywhere. Like if I'm in Kansas and I say I'm a comedian, they're like, whatever.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They don't care.
It's interesting because I listen to a lot of comics because I'm not a comic, but they always talk about the golden day of comedy and what Boston was like in the 80s and all these great times, and now they're over. Always weird that now they're over. But do you think London is still kind of part of that?
I do think it still kind of has that a little bit, yeah. I mean, because in the golden days of comedy, it was amazing. My ex-husband, he is on the business end of comedy, and he started out working at the Improvs as a manager. And he would say, like, in those days, like Judy Tenuta, I don't know if you know who that is. She's a older female comic. She would do the clubs just for the weekend and get $100,000 bonus. Like middles would get bonuses. Like the middle actor would get a bonus. Yeah,
wow. So there was just tons of people going. It was just huge business.
Tons of people going. Lots of business. You could, if you had someone saw you do the right set, you could get a $500,000 holding deal from one of the studios. I mean, this went all the way till probably the middle 90s. Yeah.
Holding deal to make a movie.
to make a TV show, or just to keep you. One network would give you a holding or development deal to try to develop a show around you, or they would give you a holding deal because they didn't want the other network to have you. Maybe they weren't really going to use you, but then they maybe had a project that was similar to your character, so they would try to get you off the market for the other net. It was pretty crazy.
And what changed? I mean, people still like to laugh. Do you think there's more choices they have, or was it?
I think it is more choices, and it just became oversaturated. Like right now, comedy, I feel, is kind of oversaturated in the States. There's a lot of comedians. There's a lot of comedians. Are there any good ones?
A lot of good ones.
There is good comics, sure, of course. But now, like in LA, every actress or every actor says they're a comedian.
Okay, for acting work or for stand-up as well?
No, comedian, for doing stand-up. But they do that because they think, it'll help get me acting work. But it's two different animals. Yeah, you can do 15 minutes in Los Angeles when all your friends come see you. But when you're in Canada, you know what I mean? And drunks are throwing beer bottles, it's not going to fly.
I listen to these comics on the podcast, and these guys are on the road. I mean, you really have to be on the road, and there's no middle ground as a comic, right?
Absolutely. When I was doing it before, I had 2 times in my career. The first time I did it for 15 years, and I literally was on the road 30 weeks a year. 30 weeks a year. I mean, that was crazy. I lived in New York the first 3 years. I didn't know the West Side from the East Side because I was constantly gone. I knew how to get to the airport. It was crazy.
You just have to make the rounds, and it's everywhere. It's the Midwest. It's like
everywhere.
Canada. It's all these little smaller towns.
It's everywhere, yeah. But it's easier if you are traveling so much to travel out of New York because the way the population is in the United States, you have all of the South, and you have like Minneapolis and up into Canada, and it's easier to fly up and down than it is to fly across when you live in the United States. So if you live in LA and you're working, you're constantly flying across the country, and that's a huge flight, so you might get up at 5 in the morning to get there barely before showtime. I mean, it's a lot of stress on your body.
Are you still traveling that much?
I do. I don't travel that much. I try to travel once a month because I have kids, so, and it can really ruin your comedy. Kids will ruin
your life.
Kids will ruin your fucking comedy. They'll help your comedy, but they'll ruin your fucking comedy. But no,
you're telling kid jokes, or just because you're not the same comedian?
Just because, like they get mad if you tell jokes about them, and like I told a joke about my kid on TV, and he got super pissed, and it was like, well, don't carve your name into the wall, asshole. Don't carve your name into the wall. You know what I mean?
Is that going specifically to one of the kids? Okay.
He knows who he is.
Okay. And was that a good joke even, or do you think your comedy gets ruined because all you're observing now is your kids?
I think it's shifted. Certainly it's shifted. I mean, it's made it more well-rounded. Or before, like I said, I was really, from the beginning, a very dirty comic. Because when I started out in Los Angeles at the time, there were 2 clubs, basically, the Improv and the Comedy Store in Los Angeles. And if you were the Improv, you were a guy like Bill Maher. You know what I mean? You were a guy that did observation, political humor more. It was very clean. You were, kind of someone who they could tidy up for television pretty quickly. Okay. But if you were at the Comedy Store, it was rock and roll. It was
Kinison
like,
and all these guys.
Oh yeah, I started in the time of Kinison, and it was crazy.
And this is mid-'80s, early 80s?
I started in 1986.
Okay.
Yeah.
And can you talk about those 2 differences? Like, well, you just explained the Improv and the Comedy Store. So which one did you spend time at?
I was a Comedy Store comic from the very beginning.
Okay.
Because at that time, there weren't that many girl comics. There were hardly any girl comics. So the woman that owned the Comedy Store, who still does, although she's very sickly now, Mitzi Shore, she was one of the first people to give a lot of women a chance. So for me, I was at the Comedy Store, and, I was 19, 20 years old at the time. And this is, I have such tremendous... I saw Richard Pryor on stage. I mean, I can't even explain to you as a comedian how effing cool that is,
Was it awe-inspiring even when you were 19 or 20?
Absolutely.
Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it was interesting because Richard Pryor would come in, and he didn't come in a lot, but if he came in, he would come at like a week at a time. And so he would come in on a Tuesday night. He wouldn't come on Mondays because Mondays at the Comedy Store was really craziness. He would come in on Tuesday nights, and you would see the great Richard Pryor eat the biggest turd on stage.
Really?
Oh yeah, like because he's trying all new material.
Yeah.
But then you would see the process of him coming night after night after night, and then by Saturday night, I mean, standing ovation. To see him work like that made you really understand how to go about it, and the fact that I got to see that is pretty amazing.
Did that instill that work ethic in you as a comedian to see that you
There
can't?
is no work ethic when you're a comedian.
Really? I don't believe you. I don't believe you at all.
Define work.
Well, okay, so prior getting up and sucking on Tuesday, everyone's seen how badly he sucked in order to get better on a Saturday performance.
Right.
Isn't that
right.
work?
Well, no, it's work, obviously, but it inspired a young performer, absolutely, and to see, I've been very lucky now because I've been in comedy and then I got out for a while and then I went back in, that I've got the pleasure to see so many people start out from the beginning, like a guy like Louis C.K. When I was doing comedy, I got really lucky because of the Star Search thing, which happened pretty early in my career. So I got a lot of opportunity way before I was ready to get opportunity. So when I was headlining clubs, like a guy like Louis C.K. was my opener. And he was way funnier than I was, but because I had the television opportunity, But the great thing is to see people's progress in their career. Like a guy like Louis C.K., when he started doing his comedy, he did comedy for a long time, but then he went into films. Like, people don't realize that he was doing films and doing all sorts of projects that did okay, like they got into festivals and played here and there a little bit, but that he has this whole backlog and whole catalog of work. And so that's what's been great about being in comedy for so long and coming back to it, is you really understand people's life path, you know what I mean? That not everyone has this straight shoot up to the stars, that it is all about the journey. And as lame as that sounds,
That's
you
our
really...
tagline here.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
No, it isn't.
No, it is.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, it's about the journey. I didn't even know that about Louis' back catalog of films and stuff like that.
Yeah. It's amazing. And he's talented. I mean, obviously a very talented guy. He was fiddling around with cameras. I was so inspired by him because whenever he would make a chunk of money, like if most of us made a chunk of money, we would splurge and spend it on. Didn't even think for a second to be creative with it. He was one of the first guys that every dollar that came in was $2 that went out on a creative project. And that's how you have to live your life, because it isn't not about fame. It is about the work, it is about the projects that you're doing. It really is that. If they work out, great. If they don't, who gives a shit, And that's what's great about nowadays with the internet.
That you can do your own projects and put them out there.
You can do your own projects,
Why you say it's all about that? You're saying for self-satisfaction, ultimately you have to do what you want to do creatively?
Well, if you do what others want you to do and you're going against your grain, it will not resonate. You know what I mean? It won't resonate because people can call you out. It's like when they used to do a night at the Apollo, I think that was the show where it was filmed out of New York, and it was black comedians. Yeah. And then you would have, one guy that, wasn't as black as the other guys, and he would get up there and do comedy, and no.
The audience would just start booing. The audience can
smell it out. Like, dude, we know you went to a white school. You got a real job. Like they know. You know what I mean? That's how comedy is, or that's how your artistic endeavor has to be. Or anything you do in your life. It's not just about an artistic endeavor. Anything you do in your life. You have to really find what you want to do and kick its ass. And if you don't make $1 million, you don't make $1 million. Can you still feed yourself when you're 52? If you can do that, then it's all good,
You live in LA, which is a crazy town to be in, and you're also in show business in LA. And does it ever get to be too much where everyone's either performing or working on the next project, or you think I need to perform or I need to be famous, more, or did you get over that when you were younger and do you just now focus on the work?
Because I'm older now, it's all about living my life and enjoying my life and trying to fill as much of my life as I can with comedy or my projects that I'm doing. Because I have kids, I have to also focus on that, you know. But when I was younger, it's a mind fuck, you know, because you are literally like, why did he get that? Why didn't I get that? I'm just like that girl. Why did that girl get that? Okay, so maybe I can't act as strong as that girl, but I'm clearly the choice, you know. And you can feed off yourself, and it's not good, you know. It can really destroy you. And it was one of the reasons that I quit comedy after 15 years, because you know, the people that aren't comedians and that are controlling the artists, you know, they kind of make it this situation where we all have to fight against each other. And especially in Los Angeles. I was very lucky that I got to also move to New York and do comedy in New York. And in New York, that was a completely different experience, because in New York, it was people offering you a hand up or down. You know what I mean? New York was different than Los Angeles.
You wouldn't expect that from New York.
You wouldn't expect that.
Right.
But it is. LA is more like, what can that get me? You know what I mean? So, but New York, it is like that a little bit, but it's very removed from Los Angeles, so you can really work on what's important to you, you know?
Ari Shaffir just moved to New York, and he's trying the whole comedy scene there. Do you think it's different nowadays as well, New York versus LA? Or is it really ultra competitive now or overdone in New York?
Yeah, you know, it's hard for me to answer that, because I haven't lived in New York for 8 or 9 years, maybe even longer, so it's hard for me to answer that. But at the time when I did live in New York, it wasn't as saturated. Comedy right now is super saturated. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy, and it's crazy how many comedians there are, and no one is really jumping out of the pack, you know? And the thing is, like, everyone thinks, oh, Louis C.K. had an overnight success. Well, it's 25 years of work, you know? And that I have all these friends that, like, because I didn't do comedy for about 9 years, and then all my friends that stayed in comedy became, you know, big stars, you know? So once someone becomes a big star, you know, sure, they're still your friend, but they have this whole other schedule now, and you hardly ever see them. And to ask someone, you know, hey, can you give me a little part on your show? It's just not done. Someone either offers to help you, but to ask is like taboo in a sense.
So how do you get back in?
Well, that's the thing. It's like I thought to myself, to get back into comedy, I'm going to have to know where all the open mics are. I know I could go to the Laugh Factory and get on stage right away. But then the thing that's bad about Los Angeles is the whole industry is there. And like for me, I knew, having gone through that process of starting comedy in Los Angeles the first time, I knew that people see you way before you're ready. If I start doing comedy, let's say in Austin, Texas, and I am farting around for 5 years trying to find my voice, no one sees me. Then I go to LA and it's like, whoa, where'd you come from? But if you're starting in the hotbed of the industry, people remember, oh, I saw her 4 years ago. She's not that, you know what?
Wow.
Yeah, so I realized I'm going to have to work outside the main clubs until I get on my feet again, because I was so nervous doing it the second time than I was the first time, because I understood, you know, how to go about it. My ex-husband at the time, he's a big manager, and so I understood how it worked. So for me, it's like, I have to start from the bottom. What can I do? Fuck it, I'm gonna take a comedy class. And this is after I won an American Comedy Award and won Star Search.
Good for you.
And that's what I did, because I had to make friends with people that were just starting out in comedy. Again, I had to swallow my pride and do it. And then literally the first time I did comedy again was in a bowling alley. It was horrific.
Wow.
Yeah, it was
How'd you do?
terrible. It was terrible. Thank God I didn't go to the Laugh Factory.
Because you were out of practice, you were terrible.
Oh, yeah. And it's more nerve-wracking, because the first time when you do it and you're, 18 or 20, you're half drunk, you don't give a shit, you don't realize, you don't understand how it really works. You're just doing it on a dare, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then the second time you understand, oh, if I go there, someone might see me, that'll be embarrassing, they won't give me acting work, you understand the whole process.
Wow, that's almost like a mind.
Yeah, it's a trip. And what's funny is, because I went to this, there's this woman in Los Angeles named Lisa Sunstead, and she has this classes called Pretty Funny Women. And like when I started doing comedy the first time, there were no classes. Like I remember when I was at was first starting to do comedy, the comedians were so mean. They were so mean. Like, I would be on stage and they'd get on the microphone and like, yeah, the diaper truck is here, Felicia. They're waiting for you up front. Like, they were so mean to me because there wasn't that many girls. And so it's so odd that then, like, 25 years later, now you just take a class and you learn how to be a comedian. So I went and did her class, and I met a bunch of girl comics, and that's how I started to understand where the open mics were and started to do it again. And I gave myself 3 years. I was like, if I can't get on television within 3 years, then I'm going to have to quit.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's quite a long-term plan.
So 2 months before the 3-year thing, I got a TV thing, and I was like, whew, that was a close one.
Dude, was it tough to survive at the Comedy Store that first couple of years? And was Mitzi hard on you? And the guys must have been really rough, but I'm guessing since you were dirty, they might have given you some respect for that? Or not?
It was an odd thing because the reason I was so dirty too, when you're 18 and 19 years old, let's say the average age of an audience in a comedy club is probably 23 to 40. Let's just say that's the average age of an audience member. When you're 18 and 19 years old, you really haven't lived your life yet or really have no understanding of how the world works. Sure, you can watch the news or whatever, and you had a couple boyfriends, but you really don't understand how to connect with the audience because you don't have any experiences that the audience has. And for me, starting out at the Comedy Store, first of all, it was in the time of Kinison and Pryor and Dice Clay, you know, and I mean, because that was rock and roll comedy. It was pretty crazy.
So for people that don't understand, what is rock and roll comedy? How would you describe it?
Oh, let me just, you know, they would do copious amounts of coke. They would be up for 3 days at a time. It was crazy. Billy Idol would come up in his motorcycle. There was a house that Mitzi owned where the Comedy Store is located on Sunset Boulevard. It's behind it is a pretty sharp hill, and up above it was this mansion called Crest Hill. They called it Crest Hill. I don't know. And she would house comedians that she liked that weren't making a lot of money. You could live at Crest Hill and work the door. That's how guys got into the Comedy Store. And so behind the Comedy Store, outside the kitchen, is where everyone would go and do all the drugs, and all these like drug dealers were there. I mean, it was insanity. I can't even explain to you the insanity of it. So much drugs went down that the police department rented another mansion next to Crest Hill so they could take pictures of the comedians doing the drugs backstage. I mean, back behind the kitchen. I mean, it was.
Would they do busts or not?
I don't know how, you know, like one time I was dating this comic. He's still one of my very best friends. His name was Alan Stevens, and he was one of Kinison's crew. They used to go as the Outlaws of comedy. I don't know if you ever heard of that. Yeah. And so he called me up, and he was like, hey, we're all going to go with Sam on the road. We're going to Canada. And I go, oh, you guys are flying to Canada? And he's like, no, we're going to rent a couple of vans, and we're going to drive over, you know, past Vancouver up into Canada. And thank God for me, I said this. I was 20 years old at the time. I was like, Alan, although I would want to hang out with you more than anything in the whole world, first of all, I have a spot Saturday night. But second of all, I'm not going to go over mountains with you people all coked up. You know what I mean? You know, because I wasn't, you know, I'd do a little freeze on my gums. I'd smoke a little weed. But for me, it wasn't my thing, you know. And you guys, I know you guys are going to go over the border with drugs because I had been at Sam's house when they had shipped drugs through the suitcases, like, you know, not shipped, but when they flew from gig to gig. I mean, it was craziness. They would have parties where they would stay up 3-4 days at a time. I mean, it was really insanity. Sure enough, they go over the border, they get busted. Ooh. Yeah. So
you're in the middle of this at the Comedy Store.
That's how I came into comedy.
And without Star Search, you wouldn't have been there. Did that help?
No, that was before Star Search. Oh. That's why I'm saying when Star Search happened, like, you know, 5 or 6 years later, it's like, this is the most apple pie contest in the whole world.
Oh, right. And you were already known as a dirty comic to people in LA. Yeah.
And how I got into comedy is when I was 18, I was a stripper, and a comedian came in the club. Oh. And I met him, and in Colorado, where I'm from, and where I was growing up then. And so I was like, comedian? What?
Did he think you were funny? Or you just, or you?
No, he thought I had a nice rack.
Oh,
No,
okay.
he didn't think I was funny.
But you never knew that was a career choice possibility?
I never knew in my, no, I had no idea. And then
Guess you'd gotten over stage fright.
I was, yeah. Well, I had more stage fright as a comedian than a stripper. Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, when I stripped, stone cold sober. But when I did comedy, I had to drink a little. You know what I mean? Yes. Yeah.
So you were saying, so you danced for someone, he was a comedian, and then he told you about it, and you were like,
Then we
"I wanna do
started,
this?"
he said, I'm a comedian, and I was like, what? What's that? And then we started dating, and then about 6 months later, we're just hanging out, and he took me to go see in Denver, Colorado, at a comedy club there, and this girl bombed on stage, and I was a little drunk. I think I was probably 18 years old at the time, and I was like, God, anyone can do comedy. I could bomb like that. And he was like, no, you don't understand how hard it is even to bomb. And I'm like, whatever. So we made this deal, this bet, and so I had to win the bet because that's how I roll. So then I tried comedy. That's how I got into comedy.
Wow. And you just rolled up to, then you decided to move to LA, and then...
Then I did it for about 6 months, and then we broke up, and then I just thought, I want to get out of Colorado. And he had opened a comedy club, and I had met a bunch of comedians, and so I moved to California.
So walk us through those first 10 years of comedy, like at the Comedy Store. And then in the background, of course, all this madness is going with Kinison going up, and then and you must have seen him go down.
Because he died pretty much, he died pretty early on. So, because it's a hard thing to talk about because comedians are the coolest people on the fucking planet. I mean, they are my peeps. You know what I mean? Like, comedians are like broken toys that you just love to death. You know what I mean? Like, you ever see the movie Toy Story?
Yeah.
When all the broken toys come out of the creepy kid's room under the bed, and they're all like, got other things stuck to them. That's what comedians are,
Okay.
And so, to see people who are so clued in on how the world in some ways really works, and who are so brilliant to be destroyed by drugs, it's sad. Like, I knew a guy, I don't know if you ever knew Mitch Hedberg.
No,
Yeah.
I've heard the name, but
Mitch Hedberg was a game changer in comedy, in my opinion. His comedy was very much like jazz. And he had made a feature film that I was an assistant director on, and he was one of my heroes. And to see someone who had the world literally by the balls to throw it away with drugs is one of the saddest things. And after he died, I was at a Starbucks, and sometimes, I don't know if they do it here, but in the States, in Starbucks, they a lot of times have like a fancy chalkboard over the cash register somewhere, and they'll put quotes from like Aristotle or really cool quotes. And after he died, I went in there, and there was a Mitch Hedberg quote, and it's like, that's how important comedy is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I saw him a few weeks before he died
Oh,
in
you
New York
did?
City.
Yeah.
And you couldn't really tell. You couldn't tell that he was going through anything, or that he just did a fantastic show. And it just felt like he was on a roll. Like everything I've heard of him prior to that, and you just thought he was doing great.
Yeah.
Really unexpected.
Yeah.
So go ahead. You were saying. So do drugs and comedy go together? I mean, is this a standard arc, or is it showbiz and drugs, or is it just?
Well, it's accessible, number one, because people give you drugs, Not all the time. It's not like it used to be. Like the best gig you could ever have is being Tommy Chung's opening act. Like, that's the best gig you could ever have on the planet, because then he doesn't carry it, so he just gives it to whoever is opening for him. But I think just because it's accessible and, and it depends on what kind of comedian you are, it just depends,
So the rock and roll comedians were destined for a certain fate.
Yeah, not necessarily a certain fate, but they just lived life pretty hard. I mean, it's really almost a mistake to say rock and roll comedians, but I'm just trying to shortly explain to what it's like. I mean, I don't know if you guys know of a comedian named Paul Mooney.
No.
Paul Mooney was one of Richard Pryor's first writers. Paul Mooney is one of the most amazing comedians you'll ever see, and one of the most uncomfortable comedians you'll ever see. It'll make you crawl out of your skin. And he was also part of that crew. I don't think he partied like they partied because he was older than by that time, and he still now is doing comedy with 20-year-olds and still the most edgiest guy doing comedy. And you know, everyone has their different path, but it really makes you understand when you see your friends pass away from something so frivolous as drugs, you know, and it just is, it's a terrible thing. You know, because then you think, wow, what else could they have said, or what other connection could they have put together, you know? And the people that do comedy, I mean, what makes you, as a broken person, stand in front of people and try to entertain them just by the timbre of your voice and, you know, and an observation? I mean, what, you know, people that do that, it's, you know, they're fucked up.
and
special.
Kind of person.
Yeah,
and special. And you love them like the broken toys.
Like, I remember when I first met Mitch Hedberg, I turned to my ex-husband and I said, I think that dude's autistic, you know what I mean? Because he could never really look you in the eye. I mean, you know, there's, or Kinison. Kinison was this guy that, you know, like, he would just try to mind fuck you all the time. Like, but he did that with everybody. Can you imagine how exhausting that is to try to mind fuck everybody in the room? You know, that's like what Hitler wanted to do. And I'm not even joking, you know what I mean? Like,
but you're still nostalgic for him.
For Kinison?
Yeah.
I'm nostalgic for the time period that he encompassed, you know. And he was one of the first guys you know, he was older than me, much older than me, but, you know, he was one of the first guys that made comedy interesting again and made it I mean, I remember when I went with him, with my friend Alan and a bunch of comedians. Before that time, comedians really it was a singular thing. You went to a gig in North Dakota, you came back, it was just you. The local people would figure out another comedian to put on the show. And when Kinison came, it was like a rock and roll train wreck, you know what I mean? Like, he took 10 people with him, it was a party. And then you would go in the theater. I remember we were in Santa Barbara at this theater, and you would be downstairs in the basement, and people would be stomping their feet, and the whole theater would shake. You know, just to see him on stage. Like that, I'd never seen that before. To understand the power of your words that would make a theater shake. I mean, that's amazing.
And that doesn't exist anymore.
I think it doesn't. I think it doesn't.
And will it ever happen in 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, 400 years?
But there are comics that tour now, but I'm saying he was one of the first guys that did that.
Really
now people tour together, which in the beginning wasn't like that. Okay. You know, it was more of a singular thing. You did the Tonight Show, so you got to go to North Dakota. You know, and at that time, that was, you know, right in the mid-'80s, that started to change because people got on the Tonight Show, and if you had a good set, that made your career. You know, that was one of the only few ways you could have a big, fantastic career was the Tonight Show. You know, and now what's great about now is even though there's so many comedians, and it's, you know, you're like in a school of fish. What's great thing now is the internet, that you can do it on your own terms.
You can have a good set on YouTube and 100 million hits.
That's right. You can do it on your own terms with a shitty camera. It doesn't even have to look good.
Do you think that's taken away some of the power that you said comedy managers had?
Oh, yeah.
So hopefully democratizes the whole system for everyone. And
I think, of course, that's like it with everything. The computer and the internet has done that, you know. I think it's, as time goes on, it's no big secret that, you know, of course there's always going to be people that are hugely famous and still within the machine. But it's going to be the evening out of it all, you know. People will make money. It won't be the huge money, you know, 3 people making huge money. Now it's, let's say, 15 people making a living, making a pretty good living, yeah.
Do you think your success, would you have rather it came later for you, like when you were 25? Or were you glad it happened when you were 18, 19, 20? And did you handle it, you know, being that famous, that young?
Well, I wasn't even though I had some fame, see, at that time too, because there was no internet, you didn't understand. You know, like, it's weird to me when young comics come up to me and they're like, "Oh my God, I totally remember when you did Star Centers. I totally remember when you did Full House." Like, and where I'm just like, Christ, you know.
What did you just say?
Oh, I totally remember when you did Star Search.
okay.
And, like, you know, especially girl comics. You were an like, I had this girl comic come up to me because I was always really dirty, and she's like, "You were the first dirty girl, one of the first dirty girl comics," which isn't true. There were a lot of, you know, like Toadie Fields. There's like so many other women comedians that people forget about. But, and it totally inspired me to do comedy. And then she got up on stage and did just some of the worst, filthiest, like, where even I'm like, geez, sister, at least put a joke in that. You know what I mean? You just can't just pull out your vagina and just be like, ah, da, da, da. You know what I mean? There has to be a reason you're showing you know, there has to be a reason for the filth, you know?
And you created that.
Well, I'm not saying I created it, but I'm saying I was one of the first people to kind of stumble around on it, you know.
Okay. So you were happy when your fame came. And what was your run like then? So you were like 15 years in comedy. You were at the Comedy Store, and then obviously you decided to stop when you had kids. What was your career like?
Well, at that time, I don't know how much you know about comedy, but in the 90s there was a big shift in comedy, and when the alternative comedy scene came about. And that was one of the reasons that I quit comedy. There was a couple of reasons. Number one, I had a child, a baby, and I was going to have another one, and I was a little bit done with it. And number two, the alternative comedy scene came around, and the people that were part of the alternative comedy scene really shunned traditional comedy. You know, and even though the people that did the alternative comedy scene were the same age as I was, but because I had already been doing comedy 5 to 10 years earlier than they had, because I started so young, I was grouped into that old school kind of mechanism. But then, you know, I come from the school of, if you're going to put a show, let's do a show. If you're going to do it, you fucking bring it. You know what I mean? And so for me, it was really hard to understand the attraction of why people would want to see alternative comedy, because it wasn't always funny, and it was awkward, and you know what I mean? They were so judgmental against each other. And I mean, comedians are kind of like that anyway. But you know, and at that point too, it kind of happened where I'd had 5 holding deals. You know, I'd been on television quite a bit, and I was never able to make the big step up. Even though I had a small amount of fame, I was never able to make the ultimate step.
Which is what, like the hour special on television, or
Right.
the big tour,
Yeah.
the super big tour?
And probably at that time I was on television at least 50 times, you know, but I wasn't, because my comedy was so dirty, it just really rubbed a lot of the wrong people, a lot of the right people wrong. Like, I remember once being at the Comedy Store, and there was this guy, Jimmy Brogan, who booked the Tonight Show, and he came up to me and he's like, "Felicia, the problem is you're just too dirty. You're just too dirty. You're never going to get work." I mean, it was really hard to get television work past a certain point. And I said, "Oh, but Jimmy, I have clean material, and where it's only a little bit dirty." And he said, "Yeah, but that's like saying, you know, there's only a little bit of garlic in the soup. You can still taste the garlic." And I said, "Yeah, but without the garlic, there's no flavor."
So you could never change your stand-up anyways.
No, because you have to do what's right for your voice, you know? Yeah.
Okay. So no regrets there?
Absolutely not. No, not at all.
And are you glad you got back into comedy?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm glad I got back into comedy, because when I quit comedy, I hated it.
9 years, though.
I hated it.
What were you doing?
Well, I did a lot of, that's when I started doing photography, and I had kids, but I mean, I couldn't even, when my ex-husband is a big-time manager, and he would always be watching, and I'd be like, "Turn that shit off." I mean, I really hated it, because it hurt me that I felt like I was shunned, you know, and then the alternative comedy scene was getting quite large, and everybody wanted those kind of people, and it hurt my feelings, you know.
That you weren't part of the party?
Yeah, that I wasn't part
included.
of that, and even my ex-husband at the time, like I remember once I used to do this hack joke about sex in the butt, like, and I would only do it on the road because I was too embarrassed to do it in time. It would be like one of those bits like when they drop the checks that you would do it, you know,
Okay.
because you don't give a shit and they're dropping the checks, and why waste good material when the checks are being dropped, and it would keep some people's attention. And he would say to me all the time, yeah, don't do that in town. I'd be like, I know, motherfucker, I know, right? But then Louis, who was one of his clients at the time, would go on stage and he would do like verbatim the same exact joke. But like it wasn't that difficult of a joke to come up with.
Yeah, I was going to say, TV must be a lot more ready for these kind of, for
yeah,
your material
now. But he would be like, oh, that's genius. Louis did that genius butt fucking joke. And I'd be like, bitch ass, I did that joke and you told me not to do it in town. You know what I mean? That's to me, it was just so defeating.
So you couldn't do the material because of you and your history of how they understood Felicia Michaels. It wasn't the joke that they didn't want to hear. They just didn't want to hear that joke from you.
They didn't want to hear it from me. They didn't want to hear it from a woman. They didn't, they just, and it would be frustrating because like a person like Janine Garofalo, I have tremendous respect for Janine Garofalo. I've seen Janine Garofalo in a club in LA or New York where it's like, oh, I fucking get why people love Janine Garofalo. But it would hurt my feelings in a sense that they gave her so many accolades, but then she would have a difficult time in front of a normal audience, because she's Janine Garofalo, you know what I mean?
She was that alternative comic. And
she was the queen of it, And so to me, it was very frustrating at the time of, wow, I just can't win. I'm getting it from all sides, so fuck it,
Did you miss like not being able to express yourself and perform and all that stuff?
Well, I had photography and I did it through that. But when I got divorced, that's when I missed it because it was so crazy making. I missed sharing that and writing jokes about that. And that's what prompted me to go back into it.
Writing jokes about the divorce.
Well, about the divorce or just, when you go through shit, that's because comedy is therapy,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
Us people from the outside don't realize all those little nuances of comedy. So, wow. Okay. That's cool. I didn't even expect all that stuff coming.
Oh, so did I chat too much?
No, it was really good. It was really good. So photography, how does that work? Can you talk about that piece you put together where it's kind of like behind the scenes and comedians and where that came from?
It's a project called Stand Up Strip Down, and when I was in New York, about a year or two before I quit comedy, because I was on the road so much, like 30 weeks out of the year. And at that time, when you worked the road, you would work Wednesdays through Sundays. So you had a lot of time on your hands during the day. And so I picked up a camera and I just made myself busy with that. And I probably should have been writing scripts, but I picked up a camera instead. And when I moved to New York, I started photographing a lot of the comedians from the beginning, like Mark Maron and Louis and all those guys in the alternative comedy scene. It was so weird. It's like, yeah, you can't come do comedy with us, but you can come photograph us. You know what I mean? See how they are. You know what I mean? So I would just do that just to practice, and it was at night, so I had to learn about exposure and all that, and I just started doing that, and then I really started getting into the photography when I quit comedy, and I really like shooting people, and I like documentary photography, and I literally was taking a shower one day, and I was like, God, I really want a project. I really, and I was racking my head about what kind of project. I think if I could have one good project, I could rock it and get some notoriety out of it. And then I was like, you're the biggest idiot on the planet because you've been photographing comedians now for 5 years. That should be your project. And so then it kind of started from that point. And
is it just photographs, or do you have writing that goes along with it to talk about?
It's just photographs, pretty much, and I will add some writing to it. And it started out on film because it was so long ago. And so, of course, I've made the transition to digital, and now sometimes I do video with it and put together little multimedia videos with it. And
cool.
And yeah, it's interesting how if I'm on a show performing, it's really hard for me to photograph because it's two sides of your brain, you know. But it's really made me appreciate comedy, even though I wasn't doing comedy. To photograph them backstage just brought a whole new, different appreciation of comedy. You know, because when you're backstage, it's all about, you know, a game of like, I'm funnier than you. You know what I mean? It's all about positioning yourself within the crowd if you're a comic, and who can I sit next to might book me somewhere. And you know what I mean? It's all about that. But when you're...
And you like these people?
I like these people.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. I love these people. I love these people. These are the people you want to go to jail with. You know what I mean? These are the people when you're coked out and about ready to die in an alley. You want comics there. You know what I mean? These are the people. Like if you're in a political situation in Cuba and someone's about to hang you, you want to be hung next to a comedian. I mean, this is what you want. You know, that's how awesome they are. And but to be able to photograph them backstage really made me appreciate everyone's different way of how they go about it, because there is that moment when you're screwing around with all the other comedians, but then you go and you walk behind the curtain. There is that moment where it's just you then. You know, that's very fascinating to see.
So you try to do your photographs when you're not performing? It's hard to do both.
It's hard to do both. Sometimes if I'll get on a show where, because now it's like I collect them. Now I feel like it's Pokemon cards, you know what I mean? Got to get them all, you know what I mean?
All the comedians.
Yes, all the comedians. So it's like if I'm on a show, let's say with Chris Rock at the Improv, which it would be very rare, but then it's like, I'm going to bring my camera, you know what I mean? So, but it's really hard to do both. It's really hard. Even to photograph, you know, if I'm going on first, then I can do it after I'm off stage. But to be able to do the photographs and then just go on stage, it's impossible.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's like an ongoing project, or you just still keep little bits of video together?
No, it's an ongoing project, and I've been working on a book, so it's an ongoing project, and it did. I have entered it, won that thing in Paris, and I'm going to do it for the rest of my life as long as they let me in a comedy club. That's how passionate I feel about it. And there are other people that do comedy photographs too, but theirs are like I know a guy, Mike Cronos. His is mostly on stage. Comedians on stage, which I kind of find boring. His photographs are beautiful though, but to me it's like, you know, I'm a comic. It's like they're just standing there with a microphone. It's like that has worn off for me, you know.
You want to get like the tension or the elation or the relaxing they're having behind the scenes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can see that in your pictures. Yeah. It's good stuff. Talk to me about podcasting. You were one of the early people doing it.
Yeah.
And you've kind of been there and done that. You kind of maybe your podcasting career mimics your career with alt comedy. I don't know. Maybe you were earlier than a lot of people that came later to the scene.
Now there's so many people podcasting.
How do you feel when I say the word podcasting? Does it make you give a little tick? Or?
You know, podcasting is awesome. It's so cool.
I agree.
It's so cool. How I even got into it was because of Joey Diaz.
Okay.
When I did comedy the first time around, I was working in Denver and headlining, and the MC was Joey Diaz. And so I barely remember Joey Diaz, but I do remember when the club owner was paying me. Joey was very funny. He hadn't been doing it very long, maybe 6 months or something, that I said a small talk as the club owner is counting out my money. Hey, that guy Joey Diaz, he's pretty funny. You should put him up more. And apparently, when I said that, he got a lot of stage time after that. It was at the Comedy Works in Denver. I don't ever remember that. And then I had seen Joey Diaz like 15 years later, but he had changed remarkably, because he used to be kind of trim and athletic kind of looking, and he, you know, is Joey now, because Joey had a good time. There's no secret about that. And he's a big guy now, and I, when I saw him again, didn't recognize him, but then it kind of put two and two together. And my friend Alan, who I spoke about earlier, he was like, Joey has this gig at the Improv in Brea, California. Maybe he'll put you on. And so I called him up, and he put me on. And then Joey was one of the first guys, because when I got divorced, my ex-husband is a big comedy manager. not very many people would talk to me. And Joey was one of the first guys that didn't give a fuck.
Because they didn't want to make enemies with your ex.
Right,
Okay.
yeah. So
that's hard to be in comedy when your ex is a manager. Jesus.
When he is one of the biggest managers,
really?
yeah. It's kind of, I get it all the time. People are like, well, we'd book you for this festival, but we don't want to cross. Then I have to call him up and say, can you call them up and say that you won't get mad? And he's like, Christ, but yeah. Like, because there's no big, he doesn't care, Although sometimes he does talk smack to me. We had to go to court over an issue, and I said to the judge, can you ask him not to talk smack about me to industry insiders? And the judge said, yes, but then you can't make jokes about him. And I thought, well, never mind.
Too much good material.
The jokes are good. So Joey called me up, and he's like, hey, would you like to write some jokes together? And I was all like, Joey Diaz called me up, because then I realized, oh, he's kind of a big comic now, And I was like, yeah. And so we just started hanging out, writing jokes and bullshitting. And then he said one day, hey, you want to do a podcast? And I was like, a podcast? What's a podcast? And the thing is, when I had stopped doing comedy and was doing a lot of photography, I really did it seriously. And I worked at a digital capture firm as one of the techs, where when they would shoot ad campaigns, they shoot now directly into the computer, And so I understood a lot of computer stuff. And he knew that about me. So he was like, we'll do a podcast together, and then you do the computer stuff. And I was like, all right, why not?
So you do all the work, and he'll just
What year was this?
This is about 3 years ago.
Okay. Yeah, 2010.
So Rogan had already been going by that point?
Rogan had already been going for quite a while at that point. But he just was like, I want to try my own podcast. And so then we just started doing it, and we practiced it like complete dorks. And he didn't even want to tape it. We would just get together and try to have funny conversations. And then we finally started taping them. And at the time, it was a little bit harder to do to figure out how to go about it. Now it's pretty easy.
Right.
And so we just did it. We didn't even have guests for the first year, because Joey is the source of a cajillion stories. And the most amazing storyteller of all time, it really is Joey Diaz. And so that's how it all started. Yeah.
Wow. And that was 2 years you did?
We did it for 2
2.5.
years. About almost 2.5 years. But it was immediate. I mean, we were surprised the first time we put an episode up. And it was like, what? This many numbers? What? And then you start asking, because it's cagey. Podcasting is cagey. Like, if I was to ask you how many hits you get a week,
everyone's like, well, even us Marin that, and Marin's like, well,
people get cagey about it.
300 and 700,000.
Yeah.
Usually.
Yeah. Okay. So you're getting like 100,000, right? You know what I mean? People get cagey
he actually averages.
about it.
He's like, me and this guy get an average of, I know.
Yeah, and then once you understand how it works, you're like, oh yeah, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, and iTunes doesn't tell you jack.
iTunes doesn't tell you anything. Yeah. And there's little tricks you can do with iTunes to kind of help your numbers and
you guys used to always ask for reviews and stuff like that.
Yeah, because if the more reviews you get, the more it puts you up into the hot list.
So you guys got hot pretty quick.
We got hot really quick, and it was an amazing experience. And he kind of schooled me on it, because the thing about Joey, because Joey, I don't know if all the listeners, all of them probably, I mean, a lot of them would know who Joey Diaz is if they're into podcasting, but some people might not. But Joey grew up on the streets, very hardcore, within a group of people who were connected, shall we say. And so he is very good at seeing something how it is, how something works, you know what I mean? Like, because that's what you do on the street. Who's that guy over there? Why is he going to that guy? Why is he taking that out of his pocket? Like, he's really good at understanding how things work pretty quickly. And so he really schooled me on the podcasting. And he would get so angry, like I would be like, because I'm a comedian and I get precious over stuff and I want to write the good joke. And he would be like, just stop that shit with the jokes. They just want to hear you talk.
Right, and because that's so different, because you guys are used to performing and cracking jokes, but if you do that on a podcast, it doesn't sound genuine, right?
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
It's very, now I could throw in a joke if I wanted to, but then it was kind of a difficult thing to
So he immediately saw it's not a stand-up act. It's completely
Yeah,
different.
he
Wow.
immediately was like, it isn't about comedy in a sense. Sure, you want to be funny. It's not about that. It's about having a real connection with people. Like, people want a personal connection. And so that's what it was about. And it was, you know, like, I used to edit the podcast because Joey can get a little racy. And so I would have a lot of fear around it, like, you know, Joey grew up on the street, so his vernacular is...
This is you're the queen of dirty comedy.
Yes, yeah. But hey, there's a, you know, but like, Joey can get... a lot of people would perceive Joey as being racist, you know, and he would say stuff where you'd be like, that would come across as racist. I understand why you're saying it, because you grew up on the street and that's the vernacular of the street, and I know you're not racist. You know what I mean? To a point. So to me, but it's also like, but you're in a Disney movie, so to me it's like, you know, I might take out a couple of words.
Okay, so you were actively editing. I remember your edits and stuff.
Yeah.
I remember your background music when you edited.
Yeah.
Where'd you get that from?
A friend of mine made it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then it ended, and he went on to his new podcast. By the way, I know Joey. I interviewed him out in LA about 6 months ago, and then we had kind of a falling out after that due to some aggressive publicizing via Twitter, via my interns. But I still have nothing but love for you, Joey, even though I can't listen to your podcast anymore. But I was a big fan of the Church of What's Happening Now, which came after your podcast. So how did yours end, and how did all that happen?
Well, you know, we did my podcast. I have a fancy garage behind my house, and that was the studio. And he said that he wanted to do another podcast, and you know, at first, like, oh, am I to stop him? Yeah, go ahead, because we, like, last year were nominated for funniest podcast up alongside What the Fuck and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And
Beauty and the Beast was, you're saying?
Beauty and the Beast was. And we were doing pretty gangbusters on numbers, but he kind of felt that he wanted to reach a different audience, you know, and so when he first said he wanted to do a podcast, and he started doing it, and I was all like, well, do what you got to do, and it's all good. That's, you know, and then I went and saw him tape one of the podcasts, and, you know, like, I can't sit there and smoke drugs. You know, I can't smoke drugs, makes me sound so old, but I can't smoke weed on a podcast. I can smoke it off the pod. You know, I have kids. I have a cranky ex-husband with a lot of money. Like, I'm just not going to do it. And so there, you know, and it came to the point where, like, we would get the most amazing fan mail. I mean, the podcast really did change people's lives, because the podcast was all about second chances, and people would write the most amazing stories to you about, I was at this point and I wanted to kill myself, but then I heard this story about the boxer whose dad, you know, raped him. You know, like, it was pretty amazing, the fan mail. But we would also get a lot of fan mail from very young listeners, 13, 14-year-old boys, that they were very attracted to the talk of drug use. And I know when Joey's talking about his former past, he doesn't do it to glorify it. It's a way of coping with what he did, and they're fucking awesome stories, and they're ridiculous, and they're funny, and they make you laugh, and they make you appreciate that there are people like Joey Diaz out in the world. You know what I mean?
It's the way of cataloging what actually happened, not to make comment on it one way or another.
Right, exactly, and I love the way you just put that. That's very amazing. So, but then that started to kind of bug me, because my boys were starting, you know, they're 12 and 13, and to understand that boys that were my son's age were taking the wrong message from the podcast started to, like, just kind of eat at me a little bit. And then when I went and saw him do the podcast, and he kept saying, you don't want to be a part of this, Felicia. At first, of course, it hurt my feelings, not in some I'm stomping my feet kind of way, but then when I saw what he was doing, it's like, yeah, I can't be a part of it. I really can't be a part of that. It's, you know, because my boys will get taken away if my ex-husband shows this to the judge. I'm dead meat, you know. And so that kind of was how that started. And I honestly have the utmost respect for Joey Diaz. But Joey Diaz can get a little aggressive. And
really?
Yeah, it's hard to imagine. And sometimes it's a little scary.
Okay.
You know, and so if I was a guy, I don't think it would have bothered me. But as a woman, you know, it was just like, I'm just kind of done with this behavior. And that being said,
As in Beauty and the Beast, you guys had conflicts about what you didn't
we
want.
would have the biggest effing fights. Like, I mean, and my house, the back of my house, there's a preschool on the other side. And one time, I swear to God, this is the first fight we ever had, because I don't know, we were talking about something and he wanted me to let go of the topic matter, and I wasn't understanding his signals, because
during the show. During
the taping of the show, because you know, and when I say this, it's with the most complete respect for Joey Diaz as a human being. Joey Diaz is an amazing person, you know, but it was hard for him it's hard for him sometimes to verbalize a difficult sentence to you if he knows it's going to hurt your feelings. It's hard for him. It's really hard for him to do. So then he'll hold on to that, and then it's like fireworks. And we got in this huge effing fight. And he's like, and when he yells at you, it's like, you know what I mean? It's like, what's that? Oh, science fiction movie with Sigourney Weaver.
Alien.
It's like the alien. The mouth comes out and spit like goes across your face, and you're like, wow. You know what I mean? It's like that. And we were in my backyard. I could hear the children playing at the preschool, swinging and you did that and all this, and we were like, fuck you. I mean, it was like the biggest, hugest fight. We had a fight one time so bad that Josh Adam Myers, this comic, was literally standing at my front door. I saw him through the window, and Joey and me were screaming at each other for 15 minutes. Screaming. You know, like, you never fucking listen, Felicia. And I'd be like, get the fuck out of my, I mean, just screaming. And afterwards, you know, it would be funny. But then it just got to the point where it's just like, you know, no, that's, you know, when you have kids and I have boys, and at the same time you're trying to teach them how to not dominate another person physically, and he never dominated me physically by any means, but you can dominate someone verbally. You can dominate people verbally and make them afraid. And I just thought, you know, I'm just done with this.
Oh, you didn't want your kids to see the podcast, or you didn't want them to see that happen in
person?
No,
It was confusing to be, you know, that morning like, you guys need to respect each other and get along, and if he says a bad thing, you can't just slug him, and you got to teach that lesson, cut to 2 hours later, you know what I mean? Get the fuck out of my house, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not fucking you, dude. You can't yell at me like that. You know what I mean? Like, basically, that's all women. You can't, like, if you're not fucking me, you can't yell at me like that. You know what I mean?
There's the bit.
That was good. The bit.
All right, so you parted ways.
We parted ways, and it wasn't anything disrespectful, and I'm very proud of Joey as a friend, even though we don't really talk. I still do consider him my friend, because he is an amazing human being. And by the way, I'm no joy to be around, and I gave back as good as I gave back. So
it's interesting what you say, because I listened to you guys for a long time, and I love the stories that you guys had on Beauty and the Beast. I mean, Jesus, like, you had some very high-profile actors get very honest about the things they did in their past, and it was a really good show to listen to.
It was an awesome show,
second chances.
Yeah.
And I mean, let's be honest, Joey's life is one big second chance, so that was the underlying.
Fuck, his life is a third chance, a fourth chance.
Yeah.
He has an amazing life.
You know, but at the same time, you know, I can understand, like, as a young boy, you hear these stories about, you know, dropping acid and doing coke and kidnapping people, and it starts to sound cool, a little bit cool, and then as you know, maybe you're a little bit older, and then you're like, you know, actually, there's actually nothing cool about that. It's actually not cool to beat someone up, and not cool to kidnap somebody, and not cool to hit somebody with a gun, and I think it's hard when you're listening to it as a younger person, maybe, to know that there is.
As a younger person, and by the way, like, sitting there and listening to Joey do it, you have an understanding that he's not saying it's cool. He's in no way is saying that it's cool.
I agree.
But you know, it was an interesting experience, and I didn't realize. I mean, one time in the very beginning, we were doing a podcast, and we're just, you know, laughing and blah blah blah, And then he's like, oh, yeah, you know, when I went to prison for kidnapping a guy. And I was like, what? What? Like, I had no idea. And I was literally we were doing the podcast, and I was like, oh, my God, I let a kidnapper in my house. My children are in the front house. What, you know what I mean? Like, you know. But
yeah, there's some real deals there, definitely. Yeah. Well, I've been on the rage side of Joey Diaz after I interviewed him in LA, and it wasn't very nice. And I thought it was one of our finest moments at London Real because we didn't engage in a Twitter verbal battle, and I didn't tell him to fuck and all that stuff. And we just took his interview down, even though it was a very good interview. But
why'd you take it down?
Because he wanted us to take it down. Yeah,
why?
He asked us to. He didn't like the way we were publicizing the interview via Twitter. And I think he thought it was like we were tweeting it out to too many people, and then he kind of lost his shit, and then it was kind of over. So that was our little brief kind of thing with Joey. But I don't have any ill feelings toward Joey. I can't listen to his podcast anymore, but I still wish him the best.
Oh, well, I'm sorry that you can't listen to his podcast anymore. I'm sorry about that because I love Joey. I love watching him still. Yeah. Still, yeah. We were at a club the other. And he didn't know I was there, and he was on stage, and I love watching Joey. Yeah, he really is one of the most fantastic natural performers I've ever seen in my life, and that's saying a lot.
Yeah, you've seen a bunch of them. So you moved on to another podcast after that?
Yeah, I did a podcast with girls called She Said What, and that went about 30 episodes, and that was a lot of fun. But there's not as many women listening to podcasts as men, and so that kind of came to an end. But now I'm working on a project called Peeping Comics, and it's going to be a video web series, and I met this girl named Susanna Lee, and she also goes by Lucky Deluxe, and she's a burlesque dancer. And I had photographed her at a festival like 3 years ago, and I was looking on Indiegogo, just farting around. You know how you smoke a little and then you're looking at stuff all over the internet. And I came across her pitch campaign because she had this idea of interviewing people at a peep show, comedians at a peep show, because she sometimes as a side job worked at the last, it is the last old school peep show in Los Angeles, California. And I just thought that was fascinating, And so we filmed them, and they're going to start coming out in September. So it's going to be Peeping Comics. And we got Paul Provenza's on it, and we've got a bunch of comedians, cool. Felipe Esparza, a bunch of comedians are on it. And so I'm kind of into that mode. And I think I might pick up podcasting again.
Really? You're not done with it?
I'm not done, but when at the end of the Girl podcast, I had done an interview with this guy, David Drozen, because I was always afraid to do it by myself, So I had interviewed this guy, David Drozen, who was was the first guy to ever record Richard Pryor and did a lot of his comedy albums. And I very much liked doing that because then it also gave me freedom to edit different stuff into it and to make it more luscious as an audio listening file. And so if I do that, if I do podcasting again, I think it will just be myself.
You can only get so creative in a podcast. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, if you have 3 people in a room, there's only so much we can do. We have a really cool conversation. I can ask you a really crazy, interesting question, but ultimately, your creativeness is limited. Right?
It kind of is. It kind of is.
And since you've done it for years, you've probably got over that initial excitement and rush and buzz and coolness. So maybe you just need a different creative
And it's a weird thing once you have a partner that has such a big personality, and he drove the numbers to the podcast. It wasn't me. I mean, that's the reality of the fact. I was lucky to be on the ride, and but it's a scary thing to do it on your own without a huge personality sitting there with you.
Growing experience.
Totally a growing experience.
So you've got that new web series coming up, and you're still doing stand-up. How do people find your dates? How do they follow you?
They can go to FeliciaMichaels.net, and I did have a .com till I quit comedy, and then someone else bought it up, and it's going to cost me like $5,000 to get that back. So it's FeliciaMichaels.net.
People still charging for domain names?
Can you believe that?
Do people still pay that much money for a domain name?
Well, if it's your name. Yeah, and
Just
someone
people who are
snatches it up.
snatching up a bunch of
Yeah.
common domain
Cyber
names.
squatting.
Yeah.
I thought that didn't work. Okay, so .net.
Yeah, and I love my Instagram. I'm an Instagram whore. So my Instagram is a comics I. So it's A_comics_I, and Felicia Michaels on Twitter, and hook me up on the Facebook. I like Facebook more than Twitter. Do you like your Twitter?
I like my Twitter because I interact with people I've never met and I don't know, which lately has been a good thing. when I ran into Joey Diaz, it wasn't good for a while. But most of the stuff is positive, so I kind of like it. But, why do you mean the Facebook, like a fan page? You find that interaction?
Oh, I have. You can just follow me on my Facebook. I hit back, and then. But I do have a Twitter, and I'm pretty active on it. But
you like Facebook better?
You know, just because I can't ever get it under 140 characters. Sometimes I'll take a picture just to Instagram it, just to put it up to Twitter so that people can go and read. Like, fuck the picture. I just want them to read the joke.
Oh, so that's written on the Instagram.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you really like the Instagram.
I do love the Instagram.
It's getting big, right?
You know, just because I like to take pictures.
Okay. Oh, yeah, of course. Photographer. And when are you going home?
I am going home on Friday. But I have a big date coming up in Minneapolis, I believe the 21st through the 25th. I'm working on a movie in New York. After that, I am producing a movie called The Devil's Tree, and it's a horror/comedy film. And it's going to be hideous, And then I was on a show last year called Parental Discretion, which is on Nick. And it's got picked up, and so hopefully in the fall I'll be filming more of those.
Wow, so you're very busy.
I am pretty busy, yeah.
Yeah, that's super. Now, you're going to do comedy tonight in London?
I'm going to do comedy tonight at the
Phoenix.
Yes. Have you been there?
I haven't been there.
I'm nervous. I'm very nervous.
I was just going to say, are you going to adjust your comedy for the English audience, or would you even know how to adjust it?
Well, that's the thing is I'm nervous about that. Then I have this opening joke about my son wanting skinny jeans, and so today I was Googling how do they say skinny jeans in England? Like, is there a different word for it? And then it's like fucking skinny jeans, and I was like, really, Felicia, pull it together.
Yeah.
As Joey would like to say to me all the time.
Pull it together,
dog.
Pull it together.
I'm curious how the English take like really dirty jokes.
From an American woman too. I don't know.
Are the English comics dirty?
I don't know. I don't think so.
There's a lot of clean ones. You know, English comedy, like you would understand it better, but it's not like you go around the city and you have to look for the comedy clubs. It's not like they spring up everywhere. And a lot of the nights are in pubs on different nights, and of course there is a comedy store and there's a few others. But and there's a lot of mainstream acts that you see in big theaters and O2s, but they're very clean. So I mean, can you name a dirty English comic? Top of your head?
No.
Really? Because I'm about to blow it up at the Phoenix.
And we could be totally wrong. You just be you.
Well, I just have to be, yeah.
Yeah, that's like the only solution, right?
That's the only solution.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. I'm sorry I was so chatty.
No.
It was okay.
Cool. It was like a good little, I mean, I hate to say history lesson because that's a horrible thing to say. But it was, like, I didn't know what was going on in comedy, and it's good to see your perspective, too.
Yeah, and comedy is an amazing thing. Go out and support your local live comedy.
Just means go watch them, basically.
Go watch some comedy, yeah. Drag your ass out of bed and go watch some comedy.
Okay. Deal. Put some butts in seats.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Paul, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And we were both basically just listening to Felicia the whole time, which is good.
It was awesome.
That means it's a good show. And good luck in New York. He said he's going to miss me when he goes to New York.
Oh, yeah, when are you moving to New York?
October 1st. I'm doing a bit of road tripping across the West Coast, so, you know.
Are you going to be in LA?
I'm going to be in LA.
Oh, you should hit me up.
Absolutely,
Okay.
will do. Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. I wish you all the best in your move.
Thank you.
And get that paper.
Done. Will do.
All right, good. If you're listening to us, please subscribe. Felicia will tell you it's good to have subscribers, and give us a review is good as well.
Yeah,
right?
go to iTunes and leave a review because it helps put you guys up in the What's Hot list.
Yes, and if you want to see our beautiful faces, we're on YouTube as well, channel London Real TV. We're on Twitter, Facebook, all that good stuff. Felicia, thanks so much.
You're very welcome.
And
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Until then, it's about the journey. Really is our tagline.
It really is?
Yeah, it really is.
Wow.
I know. All right, guys. Thanks. Bye.
Welcome to London.
Some powerful psychedelics, such as psilocybin, are now being tested in certain clinical trials. For example, as a possible cure for depression.
Yeah.
For example, dealing with the anxiety.